Welcome to Advocacy Talks, a podcast from the advocacy team at Vision Ireland. Here's what's coming up on this episode.
We use elevated printing technology. So it's like, I suppose if you imagine it as 3D kind of coming to life in image. My own personal description of it is you'll be familiar with braille, and braille being able to touch a tactile print to be able to read. And we use that in a way to make an image elevated so that it could be touched.
And now, here's Madeline McNamara.
Hello everybody and very welcome to Advocacy Talks again. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode. You may remember on our previous episode I spoke to Padraig Healy from Vision Sports Ireland. So if you missed that, do tune in because you can find out how you can get involved with any sort of sports and physical activities, which would be fantastic, particularly in these miserable days. It's always good to try and find some way of getting a bit of activity going to cheer us up. But today I am joined by Michael Grimes from Canon Ireland, and he's come to talk to me all about the recent World Unseen photography exhibition that was hosted in the Photo Museum in Temple Bar in Dublin. So I'm really looking forward to this chat because I actually visited the exhibition myself and it was amazing. So it was great to hear all the insider information about it from Michael. So Michael, welcome to Advocacy Talks.
Madeline, thank you. Thanks for inviting me along.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thank you for coming. So, as I say, we're talking about the World Unseen photography exhibition that Canon kind of put together. So maybe for those people who weren't lucky enough to actually go and experience the exhibition, maybe you could give us an idea of what was it about, what made it so special.
Yeah, well, I suppose I may start with Canon. You know, a lot of people would know Canon for photography, for cameras, and for printers in the main. But there's an awful lot more that goes on, and the whole kind of piece. I'm 20 years in Canon. That the whole kind of philosophy of Canon is around images, in every part of what we do. Whether that's for cameras, whether that's for printing equipment of all shapes and sizes, or scanners, or medical equipment, CCTV equipment companies, and software solutions. So Canon's World Unseen exhibition, it was created by Canon as a kind of first of its kind photography exhibition. To enable people who are blind, partially sighted and sighted to experience images in a slightly different way. And that was to really give a better engagement with the visual world for everyone.
No, and you were saying in a different world. So yeah, in a different way. So what was the technology that you used to make that possible?
Yeah, so we use elevated printing technology. So it's like, I suppose if you imagine it as 3D kind of coming to life in image. My own personal description of it is you'll be familiar with braille, and braille being able to touch a tactile print to be able to read, or to create signage, and we use that in a way to make an image elevated so that it could be touched, and that you have that tactile print, and it creates then a kind of an immersive experience where stories are linked to more the imagery, also the audio descriptions, and of course the touch of each image.
Yeah, because it really was an immersive experience, because I think for me it was the fact that you had the print image very big, so that was I don't know, a very large sort of picture, and then lower down you had in front of you the tactile image on one side that you could feel, and a braille description on the right, but then also the audio description as well, which I think really added to it.
Yeah, so, exactly, and each image was probably 700, nearly 3/4 of a meter wide, and probably a meter high. So it was a large image that was actually there with the braille to the right, as you say, and then on the wall there was a print as well of the image in a large fashion for each one as well. So it, as I say, it was designed for everyone. So that everyone could engage with it and everyone could really get a feel for an image. We often, I'm sighted myself, and to actually do that, to look at an image, you often don't take the actual full view of something. You glance at it. But when you look at something, some of the pictures were quite special. They trigger memories to everyone. And I think that's the important thing, is that an image creates a memory. And that's why we generally keep them. But an image is anything, really. An image can mean so much to someone. It can also bring back memories from 15, 20 years ago, which we had across the week. So being able to link those stories with the audio description and the tactile print really made the experience so immersive.
I think that's true. And it was the fact that the audio description not only gave you a description of the picture, what was in it, but it also gave the background story from the image. And I think that was really what made it so special as well, because you got the meaning then of it, what it was actually capturing and why. And just, maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of those images, and how did you come up, how did you choose them? How did Canon go about, deciding what images you would use in this exhibition?
I suppose, Madeline, they were all quite different, the images. The images were all Canon ambassador photographers or ambassadors of Canon in the images. So if I give you one example, which is of the ultrasound, a lady called Karen, and she'll forgive me for her surname, Trespass's ultrasound scan. That was the story of a lady who I think she referred to as cat eye syndrome. So visually impaired, she had her ultrasound baby scan, and her doctor brought her to see this image, or the image of her ultrasound printed in this elevated fashion, so that she could touch and feel the image. And it really resonates when you I mean, I've watched that video over 50 times at this stage, and I've children myself. It just the feeling and the emotion that she got from that, is something that she hadn't experienced, I think, with her first child. So that was really special. Even one part that I remember is she can touch the eyes, and she can feel that the baby's asleep. And
yes.
if you remember that bit, and she kind of says, oh God, I can't think of the baby's name, but she said, oh, she's asleep during the day. That's not good, So just little things like that, and so the images, they were wide and varied. There was pictures from world famous photographers of all different kind of pose scenarios, whether it was sports, whether it was Salgado, who is a worldwide recognized, I think it's a Brazilian photographer.
Was that the COVID image?
That
was that one?
No, the Brazilian, in the rainforest.
Oh yes, yeah.
And there's a guy with his hands in the air, and he's praying to stop the rain so that they can make it up the mountain.
Oh yes, I
to the gods. So that's a very different image from the ultrasound. And then there's the image of the rhino, which is the last white rhino, and again that has a very different story, with this three bodyguards beside the rhino, protecting it 365 days a year. Whereas if you looked at that image at first, you'd think, there's three guys here with rifles. What are they doing?
Yeah.
But when you hear the story and you understand the story and you can touch and feel the story, it really makes it can be a different story quite easily, and the true story from getting that description.
It really gave you that understanding of what the photo really was showing, rather than what you would maybe jump to a conclusion. But I think having the tactile image, for me, it was interesting because I would initially look at a picture and not really see what it was. I particularly like the one with the whale, and it's an image where a whale is sort of coming up out of the water, and a man is leaning out of a boat, and their faces, their heads are touching. And when I looked at that picture initially, so I'm low vision, but I have useful sight, and I couldn't really see what that was. And then when I got the description and felt the image, and then I could see it, if you know what I mean. So it didn't just help me understand, it helped me to see the picture as well as to understand it. So the three things kind of worked together, I think, for me to give me that much more of a sense of of it, and I just thought it was a lovely story, that one. You might tell us that story, actually.
It was that's and forget I think it's Vladimir the beluga whale, who and a fisherman who was a whaler originally, and for one reason or another he saw this whale in distress at one point, which he thought it was in a net of some kind, and he rescued it. This is in Norway, and the story goes on that they became friends, a beluga whale and a whaler. And I think this is only in 2021, 22. They became friends, and the whaler himself, wasn't really into kind of the limelight and being filmed and recorded. They people, tourists coming to see them. So he moved, and I think he moved some 1,000+ kilometers away. And the end of the story was that the whale followed him to where he moved to. And that picture was then took days to get and create, which was taken underwater and, as you say, kind of half underwater and half above, of them kind of kissing, touching noses. I think it's called Love, and it's a lovely story, for children as well as for adults. And I think that was kind of, as we were talking about the images, and you'd go from a rhino with 3 bodyguards and protecting him to a love story with a beluga whale and a whaler. It's very, very different. And again, as you say, when you get the full story, and you can have the image and the audio description, it's like a movie then. You're using your imagination a little bit more, and the senses as well, with the touch and the feel of the water above and below. It really makes a difference there.
Yeah, and the difference in the feel, it makes me think, you were telling me when I came to the exhibition about someone who'd come, and there's images of the coral, and where you've got one coral which is dead and one which is alive, and the different texture for that was quite startling.
Yeah, and that's a piece that Canon are working with a company called CSI, the Corals Spawning International, where we're trying to restore coral, and which is treated badly, bleaching and different things that happen that are kind of generally from humans. And the first image on the wall is of the dead coral, and the gentleman who was there, when he felt that, he said that it kind of felt grey. And we moved on around the images, and when we got to the final image, there's an image of the coral spawning in the middle, and then at the end there's the coral that's alive. And I kind of would describe that as kind of like broccoli. It was flowering, it was flourishing, and the fish were in the coral then, whereas in the original image the fish were in the water above. They weren't interested in what was, as you say, the dead coral. And when he got to the last piece, he said that felt great, not grey. The first one was grey and the second one was great. Or the last one, sorry, was great. And I said to him, that's the coral that's alive. And he smiled and he said, wow, exactly. That was, and he hadn't had the audio description either. That was just us walking around.
Wow.
So it just shows the power of, touch, and somebody leading the description as well, how that can help or didn't need to help in that regard. It was just solely on touch.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. And I mean, just myself, you can feel the difference. One was very kind of rough feeling, very, grainy and rough. And then obviously different levels on the live coral, but it was sort of much more smooth, and it just felt, as you say, very different. So I think it really did highlight the fact that through the touch you could get a sense of the difference between the two things, which I thought was really, really fascinating. But a really amazing exhibition, and I think it really did just highlight what can be done in accessibility. We've talked on a previous podcast about audio description. There was a report launched last year, and it showed how using these sort of multiple sort of accessibility tools can bring something to life for people. So you had the tactile element, but you had the audio description as well, and you had the braille, and then you also used NaviLens as well to get descriptions too.
And that was brought to us. It had been used on a previous exhibition, but the guys in the Photo Museum Ireland had started using that. NaviLens, and they were using it for kind of instructions around the building, in and out of walkways, directions to different parts of the museum, and you could also use it to get the descriptions of the images. It was, really, really useful, and it was used an awful lot during the week. We had our headsets, you could use that, and the guys had another piece of software which would also give you an audio description in different languages. So, being in Temple Bar, we did have a number of tourists and people traveling in, people there with different languages as well. So it was truly, I suppose, accessible for everyone. In any way, shape, or form, and it made that, I suppose, that storytelling, the visual storytelling, inclusive for everyone.
And what did you generally find? I mean, it sounds like very much an overwhelmingly positive reaction to the exhibition. And did you find any differences between, obviously, those people who were sort of blind or vision impaired, but just the general public? How did people generally react?
Yeah, I think it seemed like we really got a great sense of this worked. It was inclusive. It did give people an accessible exhibition that in many cases people hadn't experienced before. And it also made people who are sighted think about looking at images and what they get from images. There's an image of a Paralympian in one image, and he's an amputee, I think. And if you look at the image originally, you may not notice that image completely, but when you actually take a second look and you think about it and you listen to the audio and you have the full story, you realize that it's a very different image to what you think. And it does, again, if it's an image of someone, it really can trigger memories. We had an image of one gentleman there, who Mark Pollock, who you may know, who had traveled to the South Pole, or raced to the South Pole many years ago, and we were talking about his image that we had on display there of when he was at or he'd arrived, and there was a part of the what he was wearing which had a sticker on it, and we kind of asked, what was the sticker about? Were you covering a brand, or was it a bit of sponsorship or something? And he said no, it wasn't anything like that, but he couldn't remember. And I think it was maybe 10-15 minutes later, maybe 10 minutes later, he remembered, and he went and he said, I know what that was for. That was a Velcro piece that was used to wipe if I needed to wipe my goggles on my face, because it was so cold. But I mean, that's amazing in two ways to me. It was one, to have that memory of 18 plus years ago, to remember what that was. And to remember it when he hadn't, he couldn't see it, but he was getting it from the story. I felt that was one of the highlights of the week. Something quite small, maybe quite small, but it really showed that an image, a tactile image with description and braille, can bring back really special memories.
Oh, absolutely. That's incredible, isn't it? To me, I think overall, just the stories and the behind those images were just fantastic, and really brought to life with the tactile nature of them, which was amazing. And I guess it makes me think, how do you think that this technology might be used going forward? In various settings. I mean, we talked about the ultrasound scan, and do you think that is an area particularly that this technology could be used more widely?
Absolutely. I mean, there could be many cases we've seen from people who are working in lots and lots of different industries, from hospitality to, as you say, in a medical industry, to signage, to simple signage. A young gentleman who was there was learning braille at the moment, and he said that it was some of the best braille he'd used, because it was at a certain height that made it for him easier to read. So taking that into consideration for people who are creating this, we were lucky to work with Hackett's, who are a printer in Ireland, and they're building on this for the last 2 years when they invested in the technology of the printer and the actual software to be able to deliver and to use this going forward. But the important thing for them was to understand. They weren't coming in as experts, but they can see that they could really help. And that's why they supported us in this. So I think there's an awful lot. I mean, this has been showcased in over 32 different venues, but it could help other museums and galleries to rethink kind of accessibility, and to make exhibitions alone more inclusive. So I think there's quite a lot, and quite a lot of maybe inspiration that people got from the stories and from the images across the week.
Oh, absolutely. I was saying that at the beginning, how I think it really did showcase how, using those various types of accessibility could really make something come to life, because it's not just, relying on one thing. Was it, as you say, you're relying on the tactile nature, but also the audio and the braille and everything, which I think was really made it so special and inclusive. And I really do hope that other kind of museums and venues can take some learnings from it, as you say, to help to make experiences for everybody, not just people who are blind vision impaired, but to make them so much more meaningful, I think, which would be wonderful. And so this exhibition has been, as you say, in quite a number of occasions. Are there plans for it to go anywhere else, or what are the plans going forward, do you think, for those particular pieces?
At the moment, I suppose we're looking at what else we can do. For me, I'm working Canon Ireland and UK and Ireland, but here in Ireland, we wanted to deliver it here first, and so far the responses have been really good. We'd like to see what else is possible, what we can do with the images that we had at the event. Whether we can reuse them or whether we can rehome them, possibly, so that they can be used again. So we're talking to a number of organisations to see what we can do there, and possibly to look at other events in the future as well.
Fantastic, because it would be sad just for them not to be used again. I think it would be lovely. I think you were saying that you had a great number of people come over the week, but it would be lovely if more people could get the opportunity to at least experience some of those images, I think.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, we had people travel from wide and far. We had a lady who came on Saturday from Sligo, made that journey, and planned ahead to get there, to come, from one side of the country to the other to see the exhibition. So the more we can deliver these images to, the more people, and the more experience we can give to people. I think one of the things we did during the week was a young people's program as well, where we visited one of the schools in Dublin. There's a few children there who are visually impaired, and students that are sighted, and a workshop was delivered to them. One workshop was delivered to all, so it was inclusive to everyone, looking at how images could be used, how they could take images with camera technology, how they could work with images and create stories themselves. So I think that's something that we will hopefully be able to harness and move forward with from here on in.
Fantastic. Oh, very exciting. The future's looking bright for tactile imagery and inclusivity, which is amazing. So we're I was delighted to get to come and see the exhibition myself, and really did enjoy it, and speaking to other people who went as well and got an awful lot from it. So thank you so much for coming and telling me about it today. Really do appreciate it, Michael. It's been great.
Oh, thank you, Madeline, and thank you to anyone who did come to visit and take the time. It was it was a great experience. It was a great learning curve for us as well, and it was great to see the interest and the feedback that we got. And as I say, hopefully there'll be more to come as well with tactile printing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. Brilliant. Well, look, thank you for listening today. If you want any help and support from Vision Ireland, you can always log on to our website at www.vi.ie, or you can call our info line on 1800 911 250. So look, until next time, keep warm and out of the rain if you can, and all the best. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Advocacy Talks. To get in touch with our advocacy team, send us an email to campaigns@vi.ie, or why not join one of our local advocacy networks? where you can work together with others to solve some of the biggest problems facing blind and partially sighted people in Ireland. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.